And then I saw the topic, prove it. Like, how can I prove it? Proof of spirit, of the divine, that presence, Mother Nature, God. I mean, how can I prove that? I mean, I can prove 1 + 2 = 3. You know, like, there's 1 apple. If I add 2 more, I have 3. That I can prove. But I, you know, and then I think about it, and I look at an apple, and there's Mother Nature right there. There's the proof of you plant a seed, and up comes an apple. And so there's also, you know, for me, I'm not going to go into the first chapter of the Bible, but for me personally, I grew up with an apple tree in our backyard. And when my parents bought the house, my grandfather had an apple tree in his backyard. So he brought over a little, I don't know if he brought over a seed or apple or but anyway, I know he planted the apple tree. And you know, when I was a teenager, there was finally some apples, and I'd go out and I'd get to pick the apples. But my mother would always make apple pies, and I would watch her. And when I was in college, my roommate was an aspiring engineer major. He wasn't quite smart enough to be an engineer, but that's what his goal was. But he used to call me Mr. Pie. He had an engineering class, and he'd call me Mr. Pie. Well, 20 years later, I'm called Mr. Pie again because I love to make pies. You know, I bring pies to my neighbors. Expect me to make a pie when I visit, and so it's this kind of continuation from my grandfather planting a seed, and my mom making pies, and me making pies, and me making pies. I see my daughter Lucy and some of my friends who have made pies for her. So there's this connection. And so what is, you know, my mom passed a couple years ago. My grandfather's been dead for 35 years or more. And, but there's still this connection, the seed that was planted a long time ago. So I don't know. I just see that that's a little bit of proof to me that there's some kind of connection, there's some spirit, there's something that connects us all. Last week, Laura Rosewood talked about spirit is unique to each of us, and my experience of spirit is different than yours. My wife is a Methodist, and her belief is different than other Christians, Baptists, Catholics, and that's different than the practice of Hindus and the beliefs of Muslims and Jews. So I can only prove it for myself. And I was relieved to read in the monthly global theme details where it is recommended that, you know, the 600 centers around the world cover the same topic, and also the points that they would like us to cover. So I don't have to prove it to you. I'm just here to nudge you to notice the opportunity to prove it to yourself. So how do you prove it? Well, how does one get to Carnegie Hall? By practicing. How does one demonstrate any principle? By proving it. How does one live spiritually? By practicing and proving it. I love the idea of practicing. Right? I've never been, you know, a lot of people think, oh, I got to work on myself. I got to work at this. You know, this is what I'm working on me to make myself. I hate the idea of work. I have memories of working for others, and it's always, you know, it's their priorities, their profit, their ways of doing things, their product that didn't really reflect who I was. It's probably why I started my own business when I was 30, and I'm still doing my passion. Practice reflects who I am. So hopefully that is true for you. You know, I'm going to talk a lot about my own experience here because I can't talk about yours. And I kind of looked at the topics and the way they laid it out And I'm going to follow kind of their big ideas, but I'm going to try to just share my own experience, and hopefully that kind of relates to some of the experiences you've had as well. So the things that you've practiced and wanted to do, possibly it's an instrument or yoga or dance, or maybe you've practiced a sport or something else that you're passionate about. Is there anything that you're sorry you've not followed through on? If your goal is to make the ice skating team next week at the Olympics, I'm thinking you might not make it. No matter how much faith you have, maybe you're not going to do that. I see someone smiling who was talking about going out to ice skate this weekend, and should he get out or not? But sometimes we need to take baby steps. I think Mary Jo mentioned this recently, the idea of taking baby steps. And this is true of spiritual practices as well. You may want to be enlightened. This is like the gold medal of the Olympics of spiritualism. You can definitely do it, but it will likely take more than a week. Practice will get you closer to the Olympics. If you have ever played an instrument or written poetry, you have good days and you have bad days. It doesn't mean that you give up because you have a bad day. And the same is true of spirituality. Spiritual living doesn't just happen on Sunday mornings. The divine knocks on your door every day. It's your choice to open the door and see if you are there. Linda Watson, the leader of the National Practitioner Mentor Circle that Mary Jo and I are in, had a couple of questions she asked us the other night. Where am I now? What is beckoning me? Where are you now? And what is beckoning you? What ways are you being called to expand, deepen, enlarge, learn, grow? We also read a poem the other night, and here's the first few lines. It's from Still Possible by David White. It is still possible to be kind to yourself, to drop constraints and fall often to your knees. It's not too late now to bow to what beckons. The world is still swimming around you as you kneel transfigured by what sweeps on. It's still possible to leave every fearful former self in the wake. Newly heard words issuing from an astonishing mouth. I believe that mouth is your mouth. Those newly heard words. Spiritual living is a way of life that is available to you every moment of every day. When we apply spiritual tools and principles to every area of our lives daily, life flows easier. Choices are clearer. Seemingly, miracles are everyday occurrences. Our organization is called the Centers for Spiritual Living. Feeling excited about life requires active participation, application, and practice. Life is an experience that must be experienced. Here at CSL, we practice the revelations of religions, the opinions of philosophers, and the laws of science applied to human needs and aspirations of all. Science. Science asks us to prove principles, so let's prove it. One of the greatest difficulties of New Order thought is that we are likely to indulge too much in theory and too little in practice. As a matter of fact, we only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. That's what we cannot prove, or may not be true. That which we can prove certainly must be and is the truth. So there's 3 points that were laid out by the national centers that we should touch upon, and science is first one that we'll just briefly talk about. And the founder of our practice, Ernest Holmes, titled his book "The Science of Mind." He intentionally used the word science, from the pages that Gary read earlier. It's actually pages 51 and 52 from The Science of Mind. It's easy enough to rush about shouting that there are no sick people, but this will never heal those that appear to be sick. It's easy to proclaim that there are no needy. Anyone can say this, whether they are wise or unwise. If we are to prove such statements to be facts in our experience, we must and shall be compelled to do more than announce a principle. No matter how true it may be, we must prove it. And how do we prove it? Part 2 of the discussion is the hypothesis. And that change your thinking, change your life is part of our philosophy. When was the last time you actually looked at this idea and looked at it curiously as a scientific method? Last week we explored the value of asking questions, and this month we've been looking at wonder in our daily lives and the power of curiosity. We've already seen that simply stating a spiritual principle doesn't change our experience. So what does change your thinking really mean? Perhaps it means not only changing what we think about, but the way we think. Perhaps in order to really change our lives, more than just thinking, we need to change our beliefs and our behaviors. Heck, I'm an old dog, but I changed my thinking. Perhaps our thoughts and beliefs and behaviors arise from our experiences, and what we think and believe and how we behave also influence our experiences. I still have a hard time using the word God. After 50 years of hearing the definition of God as a bearded puppeteer on a throne up there somewhere, listening to everybody and everywhere in the world, approving or disapproving of our actions and beliefs, I couldn't believe in him. And, it would have to be a him. It couldn't be a woman. I don't think a woman would be more nurturing anyway, but a him deciding if we were on the good or the naughty list. He would greet me at the gates of heaven to choose if I could go to heaven or I'd go to hell. How could a loving God make me fear him, to respect him? How could wars and starving exist if this was a loving God? Until I was 50, I played it safe. I was an agnostic. I thought I was an atheist, but I think, there's a chance. I better play it safe, just in case it greets me there. But, when I would hike, I would feel a presence. I felt Mother Nature surrounding me. You look out the window today and there's Mother Nature, her beautiful white dress surrounding the earth, her beauty. And I felt that Mother Nature surrounding me. I get tingly inside when I listen to the sizzle the waves make after they crash. That was my introduction to the divine. Many of you know I do video production for a living. I stopped doing weddings when I was 40, but I used to joke that The only time I would go to church was when I was paid to go. Years later, I got paid. This is long after I stopped doing weddings, but I got paid to go to a church to record Philip Newell speaking, and he was talking about Celtic mystics who saw God everywhere in nature. And he said, you don't have to go to church to find God. The real cathedral of God is in the whole of creation. If the church's symbols and rituals pointed more clearly to the world as God's dwelling place, we might then more fully rediscover that God's heartbeat can be heard in the whole of life, the heart of our lives, if we will only listen. And I listened, and I heard Mother Nature whispering. Here was my baby step toward spiritual awakening, my first evidence of proof. Take a moment, think of moments that you saw proof of the divine. It could be like Laura last week when she was going to a show and found herself in a parking lot right next to the entrance that she wanted to go in to see a particular exhibit. And without knowing how she had gotten there, she looked up. There was the entrance she wanted to be. Maybe it's more, maybe it's that you realized you could shift from being abused, being free. Maybe it was from simply surviving to thriving. All of these things require action. Almost always, these are baby steps taken. Laura wouldn't have found the entrance if she hadn't gotten in the car and headed to the event of the location. Think of some baby steps you might take and experience the benefits as a result. Think of this in your own life. The coincidences or intuition that's led you down the right path. For me, this past week was filled with what I'll call divine intervention. When I took this brand new, I did this before challenge of speaking today, I didn't know about the 7 shoots that would come up in the last 10 days prior, or the 2 edit deadlines I would have for Friday. And as a business owner, I wasn't thinking about the January 31st deadline for my corporate taxes, the W-2s, the 1099s, the federal and state unemployment, the 940s, all the other tax stuff that happens that's due tomorrow. About 3 weeks ago, when these productions were coming together, my wife got off a bench and heard a crack in her knee. She went to the director and had knee surgery scheduled this past week. After she got, after which she can put no pressure on her legs for 6 weeks, and I would need to help her this week around the house for several days. She also had 2 oral surgeries already scheduled in the weeks before the surgery. So there's been a lot of faith going into her weeks, her time. So there's been a lot of time for flipping fear to faith. Spend time in fear, but the opposite of that is faith. Which way would you rather proceed? For me, I practice a lot. many times. And I don't think it was the divine that realized I didn't have to wait till this week to do my taxes, for the deadline tomorrow. I could actually do that weeks ago. I wasn't divine into it, dimension, but it was action. And, it was about 3 weeks ago that these productions were coming together, and it's getting a little tense. So preparing them, those taxes and things, it brought up a lot of doubt, but maybe that I would get through it, and I had to shift from faith several times. I found someone to cover my Tuesday shoot, the day of the surgery, kind of spreading abundance to another. I received a letter this week from the IRS that they only need a few more weeks to review a letter that I sent them in May, questioning a payment I should be getting from them. So that they were listening. My Friday shoot, recording a story written by Noah Webster in 1793. He wrote this so school children of the day could learn about the suffering of West Hartford slaves. And that was moved to the spring, so I'm still going to get to do that wonderful project. Mother Nature canceled my shoot yesterday, and so I was able to, I'll still be able to do that. And many times, feeling a religious experience and the privilege of editing the International Holocaust Remembrance Day video, and it will premiere tonight. So it's pretty amazing to your survivors, your children, school children of today, talk about what they've learned about bullying and what things could happen. But most importantly, these shifts in productions and allowed me to do the most important thing, and that was to support my wife. Literally, this past time. She would get up from a chair or bed. Through prayer, she's had a lot of discomfort, but carrying around the cast, but she has a little pain after her surgery. So some might say all of this, the way this all flowed, would have happened without faith. And to them, I say, prove it. So many times I've stopped in stillness for thanks of the moment, to the projects I was working on, the warmth in our home, food on our table. So I need your help now. I would love for you to prove it. We formed a question. We've got a hypothesis. And now, for you, it's time to prove it. And how do you do it? How do you prove it? By practicing. The area many of us want to experiment with is this idea of changing thoughts and behaviors is in our abundance. In her book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, Simple Guide to Unlimited Abundance, the author Edward Gaines shares a story about an experiment where she practices tithing and how she gave her last dollar and the floodgates came changing. It changed her life forever. The story is inspirational, but hearing about it or reading about it will change your life. You can never fully understand the power of this or any spiritual practice unless you experiment for yourself. No one can do it for you. You have to prove it. So what ways are you drawn in deeply? What do you want to expand in your life? I recently heard author Greg Lavoie talking about when you're being called for growth, do you dare? Do you set yourself up for failure? Do you have the courage to have integrity in yourself? What do you have to do to get bigger? When you blast off like a rocket, there is still gravitational force to bring you down. What sacrifice do you have to make? No, sacrifice is from the word sacred. He talks about taking a step and a pause. Recently, in a miracle moment, I spoke to someone and they said they were taking action on a dream of theirs. And they found a home that they felt could become their sanctuary. But they would have to work more hours to afford it. And this would mean they would be in their sanctuary less. I'm not sure what happened, how they proceeded. But I think taking a pause before blasting off, being still, listening, knowing the divine within will clear our path to the right door to go in. The 12 Steps program transforms lives because people work the steps. They take responsibility for their lives and they practice. The same can be true for the Centers for Spiritual Living. Transforms lives when we take responsibility for our own growth and we practice. But we do have to practice. And see no stranger, Valerie Kaur writes, we become what we practice. A demonstration of this is the result of embodying something so fully and so completely that it takes form. For me, the best way to practice is to have a teacher. I've had piano teachers, I've had yoga teachers, taken more than a dozen classes at the center and online. Teachers always nudge me. The greatest athletes heading towards the Olympics have coaches. Who am I not to have a coach? Who am I not to have a teacher? It was mentioned that Jackie LeBar is starting a class. The power of the word. When you change the way you think, your life changes. Information about that is in our newsletter. And if you go to the website, Cassie can bring up the website. So if people are interested in getting the newsletter, they can sign up for it. We also heard about Moni teaching the class of financial freedom. I think I found financial freedom, when taking that class with several people on Zoom. And also Foundations, which Gary is going to be teaching, is the perfect course for newcomers, so to repeat, to discover the thoughts, the new thought teachings, and the teachings of this center. Ben Franklin said, tell me, and I forget. Teach me, and I may remember. Involve me. Over the course of 2022, the Center's weekly messages will give us many opportunities to practice in different areas, laboratories of our lives with a variety of practical tools, prove spiritual principles. Think of a practice. Think of a passion. Think of something that step into the unknown. During a piece of music, we saw a bridge. Think of stepping onto the bridge, crossing over to a new space in your life, and the other side. Pause in the middle of the bridge, back your old self. Love that self. Move on. for the new self. It's on the other side. Life is an experience that must be experienced. Our great experiment this year and every year is discover how approaching life with awe, wonder, curiosity, and inquisitiveness transforms our experience. So I'm not a minister. Normally the minister at this time would take questions. And just for a moment, I'm going to ask you a question to think about is what is it? What miracles have you noticed over the past week? What passions are you going to pursue in the next week? We can talk about this at the close of the Zoom. We have kind of a moment or five to chat, and we can certainly chat about that. But I'd love to hear what your passion is and kind of your proof